Reading comprehension can be a source of stress for a lot of GED test takers, and I put this video together to help you learn tips and tricks and strategies and to get some practice reading and answering questions to hopefully help you get a better score on GED RLA and to pass faster so you can move on to bigger and better things in life. My father was, I am sure, intended by nature to be a cheerful, kindly man. Until he was 34 years old, he worked as a farmhand for a man named Thomas Butterworth, whose place lay near the town of Bidwell, Ohio. He had then a horse of his own, and on Saturday evenings drove into towns to spend a few hours socializing with other farmhands. Who are the characters introduced in this paragraph? Please name them. So I'll let you pause the video, try this out, and whenever you're ready, we'll go over the answer. So here we have the narrator, which is a fancy word for the person telling the story. We have the narrator's father, and we also have Thomas. Now, I recommend when you are reading a story or a fiction passage on your test, two of the first things to figure out are the setting, where is the story taking place, and who are the characters. And in my opinion, from my experience teaching reading comprehension, not being able to keep track of the characters is one reason why test takers sometimes struggle. So what I would recommend, especially if you know that you really struggle with reading comprehension, is to have a sheet of paper out, or you could do it on your computer, or on your phone too, whatever's easiest for you. And every time a character is introduced in the story, just put the person's name down and maybe just jot down a note or two to help you remember who that character is. And eventually maybe you'll be able to do it better in your head without writing it down. But that's one suggestion that you can try if you're really struggling. But anyway, figuring out where's the story taking place and who are the major players in the story, that's a really good starting point for reading comprehension. In town, he stood about in Ben Head's saloon, crowded on Saturday evenings with visiting farmhands. Songs were sung and glasses thumped. At 10 o'clock, father drove home along a lonely country road, made his horse comfortable for the night, and himself went to bed, quite happy in his position in life. He had at that time no notion of trying to rise in the world. Question: which of the following is most likely true based on the text above? A. The father was unhappy with his job. B. The father was saving up his money to purchase Ben Head's saloon. C. The father was content with the way things were at the time. Or D. Thomas Butterworth and the father had conflict with each other. So now is your chance to pause the video, try to figure this out, take all the time you need to reread if you need to, and whenever you're ready, we'll go over the answer. Okay, so C is the correct answer here. The father was content with the way things were at the time. And let me give you a little tip here. Now, this isn't always going to work, but sometimes it will. If you see words in the passage that match words in an answer choice, you might want to look at that answer choice more closely because it might be right. And if you look right here on the screen, we see that in the passage it says at that time, which I've bolded and underlined to draw your attention to it. And answer choice C says at the time, all right? So just keep that in mind. It's not always going to work, but sometimes, if you look for words in the answer choices that match those in the passage, sometimes that's going to help you get the right answer. All right, again, that's just kind of a trick if you have to guess, all right, but there's no guarantee that's always going to work. It was in the spring of his 35th year that father married my mother, then a country school teacher, and in the following spring I came wriggling and crying into the world. Something happened to the two people. They became ambitious. The American passion for getting up in the world took possession of them. In which of the following types of settings does the story most likely take place? A. An urban setting, B. A suburban setting, or C. A rural setting, or D. None of the above. So now is your chance to pause the video, try to figure this out, and whenever you're ready, we'll go over the answer. Okay, so let's break these down. So an urban setting, that's just another way of saying the story would be set in a city. A suburban setting would mean just outside of a city, and a rural setting would be in a country-like area. And so since we see the word country here in the passage, that's a clue that this is set in a rural area. Now, I grew up in a rural area in Pennsylvania, kind of out in the countryside, and but really for the last 10 years of my life, I've lived in different cities here. And so just keep in mind, urban means city, suburban means right outside of a city, and rural means out in the country, basically. Okay, so here's a tip. Again, I mentioned this earlier in the video, but it's always worth repeating. Figuring out the setting is really important, and it's important for several reasons. The most obvious reason this is important is because you can get questions that just ask you, what is the setting of the story? All right, so it's important to figure that out because you'll get questions about it, but it also helps you with your reading comprehension. Okay, and if a story is taking place in a busy setting in a busy city versus if a story is set out on a farm somewhere, it gives you quite a different mental picture while you're reading the story. So again, the setting is important not just for questions, but it's also important for you understanding the story. And setting is just where the story takes place and also when. So again, if you really struggle with reading comprehension, one thing I would recommend whenever you're reading a story is to identify those characters and also try to figure out where is the story taking place and when is it taking place. And also, whenever the setting changes, I would also try to look for those places too. It may have been that mother was blank. Being a school teacher, she had no doubt read books and magazines. She had, I presume, read of how Garfield, Lincoln, and other Americans rose to fame and greatness, and she may have dreamed that I would someday rule people and cities. Which of the following most likely fits in the blank? A. Hurried, B. Responsible, C. Mean, or D. Puzzled? Now is your chance to pause the video, try to figure this out, and whenever you're ready, we'll go over the answer. So the correct answer here is B. Responsible. And one trick you can try for really most of the GED test is process of elimination. And I know people who have done well on the test and they said that they would try to eliminate answer choices that didn't make sense. And even if you have to guess, it's a lot easier to guess between 2 answer choices than it is 4. So just a tip there, but the answer to this one is B. At any rate, she induced father to give up his place as a farmhand, sell his horse, and embark on an independent enterprise of his own. She was a tall, silent woman with troubled gray eyes. For herself she wanted nothing. For father and myself she was incurably ambitious. The first venture into which the 2 people went turned out badly. They rented 10 acres of stony land on Griggs Road, 8 miles from Bidwell, and launched into chicken raising. I grew into boyhood on the place and got my first impressions of life there. Okay, which of the following is false? A. The first venture the narrator's parents undertook was a failure. B. The land the narrator's parents rented was on Griggs Road. C. Bidwell was 8 miles from the land the narrator's parents rented. Or D. The narrator's parents started a carpet cleaning business. So now's your chance to pause the video, try to figure this out, and whenever you're ready, we'll go over the answer. Okay, so basically, for this question, you can use process of elimination, as I was just saying, if you'd like. But a good strategy is just to kind of go answer by answer by answer and just check in the passage and see if it's right, all right? So it tells us, answer A, the first venture the narrator's parents undertook was a failure. Well, it tells us right in the first sentence, the first venture into which the 2 people went turned out badly. Okay, so basically that's another way. If something turned out badly, that's another way of saying it's a failure, all right? You could go to B, you can check that. You can go to C, you can check that. And you get to D, and you say, wait a minute, all right? I don't think it's a carpet cleaning business. It doesn't say that, all right? It says that they rented 10 acres of stony land on Griggs' Road, 8 miles from Bidwell, and launched into chicken raising. So the business that they're going into is chicken raising. It's not carpet cleaning. So D here is the answer. Which of the following is false? D is correct. So this video's champion shoutout goes to a test taker who says, at 25, I decided I'd get my GED because I have a government job lined up and needed it. And the test taker wants to provide some feedback for those who are studying right now. So the test taker says about social studies and science, I was initially nervous about the time. At 2.5 minutes a question, I thought I'd break under pressure. I ended both social studies and science with over 35 minutes to spare. However, I didn't get one Punnett square question, and I spent probably 3 hours learning chemical equations, but I only got one of those. Same with the conversions. I was really hoping I would get those, but didn't get any. So that's about social studies and science. And even though this is an RLA video, this test taker shared some tips from the math section, so I wanted to share these here too in case you also have to take math still. This person says, math had me nervous as I never got past basic algebra in high school. So watching your videos, I was learning stuff I never have before. I knew I needed to study a lot on the subject. However, I only got stumped on quite a few types of questions, so with process of elimination, I made an educated guess on probably 10. Just knowing that 2 negatives make a positive helped me on a question. It's the little things that, and if I didn't know how to use the calculator, it probably would have been a fail. There was only one mean and median question, 1% question, no scientific notation questions. There were no slope questions that involved a graph. However, I got very hard slope questions like this, and the person gave a couple examples here. So if you need to do math still, hopefully this helps you out. And so here's what the test taker said about reading, which the test taker said reading was the most stressful section. Even though I got 160 on my reading, I honestly thought I was going to fail. Most questions involve reading long passages and then answering a question relating to the passage. Like, what would the author's meaning in the excerpt be if the words vaguely was changed to mysteriously? Sounds easy, right? Well, with 4 answers, one was clearly not it, but the other 3 were almost identical, and it was honestly a guessing game. It was very stressful, so I went with my gut at the end of the reading test. I only had 2 minutes left over, but those types of questions were over half the reading. I thought I failed, but ended up choosing the right ones. I was stressed. The writing of the essay was easy for me. I have much more feedback if anybody has questions. I literally took my test a few days ago. I've actually heard a lot of people say before that while they were taking their test, they thought they were going to fail and then they ended up passing anyway. So you never know what can happen. From the beginning, they were impressions of disaster. And if, in my turn, I am a gloomy man inclined to see the darker side of life, I attribute it to the fact that what should have been for me the happy, joyous days of childhood were spent on a chicken farm. Please restate the text above in your own words in no more than 2 to 3 sentences. So now's your chance to pause the video. You can do this on a sheet of paper, you can do it in your head, you can do it on your phone, whatever works for you. It's just important to give this a try. Whenever you're ready, we'll go over the answer. So restating is just what it sounds like. You're restating something in different words. So that's like, if you watch a TV show and you come in and to work, or you go see a friend the next day and someone says, "Hey, I missed that TV show last night. What happened?" And you put in your own words what happened in that episode. Okay, that is just what I mean by restating. Okay, and this is a proven way to enhance your reading comprehension skills. So this is just an example. It would be a really, really, really unlikely chance that you guess the exact example I put here. So there's really no right or wrong answer to this as long as you gave it a shot, but I have. The narrator believes if people think he is a gloomy person, it's because he experienced disaster at a young age and also had to spend time on a chicken farm rather than having fun. Okay, so if you had something like that or something, along these lines, maybe you had something a bit different, as long as you tried to take this text here and put it in your own words and explain it in your own terms, then consider that you got the answer right. And this is just a tip, when you're reading, it's a good practice to get into to pause every now and then and put things in your own words. Ask yourself if you understand what's happening well enough to explain it to someone else. All right, so if you're reading and you pause and you ask yourself, do I understand what I just read? Could I explain this to somebody else? If the answer is no, all right, you might want to go back and reread. Now, on your test, obviously, you have to be mindful of the time, so it's not going to be practical to pause too much and do this, but it's a good habit to get into every now and then, especially when you're just practicing. And it is also a proven way to boost your reading comprehension. And that brings me to the rap paraphrasing strategy. Now, if you're just seeing this strategy for the first time, hopefully this will be really helpful to you. If you've seen this in my videos before, you're probably used to me going over this, but it is really, really, really important here. So I'm going to break it down again. The rap paraphrasing strategy, the R stands for read the paragraph. The A stands for ask what's the main idea and 2 supporting ideas. And the P stands for put it in your own words. Now, the rap strategy, it comes from Shoemaker, Denton, and Deschler. I think their names were. I've talked about it in many other videos. This is something that has a lot of research behind it. And anyway, this is just a strategy you can use. And particularly the P is very important here to help your reading comprehension, put it in your own words. So we've essentially practiced doing this. And we're going to skip talking about the main ideas and supporting ideas right now because I don't want to overload you. But the main idea here is to, no pun intended, is to pause every now and then and practice putting things into your own words. And over time, that will help your reading comprehension skills. There's evidence behind this rap paraphrasing strategy. Do you play any musical instruments? I used to play the guitar. I haven't played in a while, though. Do you have a favorite childhood video game? The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time for Nintendo 64? Is a hot dog a sandwich? I don't think so. What is the first thing you drink when you wake up? Definitely coffee. Do you work better at home with background noise? I don't. One unversed in such matters can have no notion of the many and tragic things that can happen to a chicken. It is born out of an egg, lives for a few weeks as a tiny fluffy thing, then becomes hideously naked, eats quantities of corn and meal bought by the sweat of your father's brow, gets diseases called pip, cholera, and other names, stands looking with stupid eyes at the sun, becomes sick, and dies. So the question is, the word unversed above most likely means which of the following? Is it A, having expertise, B, lacking expertise, C, possessing unwavering determination, or D, having a problem with being on time? So now is your chance to pause the video, try to figure this out, and whenever you're ready, we'll go over the answer. So in this case here, the answer is B, lacking expertise. And one kind of trick here sometimes that you can do is instead of reading this word unversed, you can kind of reread the sentence in your head, but plug in an answer choice. So what I mean would be you could read it and you could say, one, lacking expertise in such matters can have no notion of the many, and just see if that kind of sounds right. And sometimes by doing that, the correct answer will jump out at you. So B, at any rate here, B is the correct answer. And let me show you another tip here. So see how if you look at A and B, A says having expertise and B says lacking expertise. So see how A and B are opposites, right? They can't both be correct. All right, the word either means having expertise or lacking expertise. It can't be both ways. And the point here is that sometimes look for cases in which two answer choices seem to say opposite things. If you get stuck and you just have no idea and you have to guess, all right, there's a good chance that one of these answers is going to be correct. All right, now again, this won't always work. There's no guarantee. It's always better to try to use your critical thinking skills and your reading comprehension skills to get questions right rather than relying on tips and tricks. That won't always work. But that being said, if you have to guess on a question and you're completely stumped, if you see two answer choices like this, all right, one of them is probably what you want to guess. All right, again, there's no guarantee, just a tip. One unversed in such matters can have no notion of the many and tragic things that can happen to a chicken. Okay, so we already read this passage, so I won't reread it, but we have a different question this time. According to the narrator, which of the following is true? After birth, a chicken lives for a few days as a tiny fluffy thing. B, a chicken will avoid eating corn a few weeks after birth. Or C, a chicken is likely to get sick a few weeks after birth. Or D, none of the above. So now is your chance to pause the video, try to figure this out, and whenever you're ready, we'll go over the answer. Okay, so C is correct. A chicken is likely to get sick a few weeks after birth, and you can see the sentence right there, or the part of the sentence right there that kind of gives the answer away.
Tell me, have you been practicing your reading?
A few hens and now and then a rooster struggle through to maturity. The hens lay eggs out of which come other chickens, and the dreadful cycle is thus made complete. It is all unbelievably blank. Most philosophers must have been raised on chicken farms. Which of the following words most likely fits in the blank above? Is it A, lazy? Is it B, colorful? Is it C, complex? Or is it D, cozy? Now is your chance to pause the video, try to figure this out, and whenever you're ready, we'll go over the answer. Okay, the answer here is C, complex. I, however, digress. My tale does not primarily concern itself with the hen. If correctly told, it will center on the egg. For 10 years, my father and mother struggled to make our chicken farm pay, and then they gave up that struggle and began another. They moved into the town of Bidwell, Ohio, and embarked in the restaurant business. Okay, so now it's time to practice prediction, all right? Prediction is another evidence-based skill that can help your reading comprehension. So what are two possible outcomes that you think could happen now with the family embarking in the restaurant business? So now is your chance to pause the video, try to figure this out, and then of course we'll go over some possible answers, although there is not necessarily a right or wrong one here. Okay, so the obvious ones, or at least obvious to me, is that there could be failure or there could be success. All right, now you could get as elaborate or as simple as you want with these. Like I said, there's no right or wrong answers. The point is just to practice predicting what's going to happen next. All right, and whether you get the prediction right or wrong, that's really not the most important thing. The important thing is that by doing this, it helps with your reading comprehension. It helps you process the story on a deeper level, and anything that you can do that is probably going to help you with understanding the story better. All right, so here's your tip. Pause every now and then and try to make a prediction about what will happen next in the story. Try to think about 2 to 3 different outcomes. Now, obviously, you're going to want to manage that time on your test. If you do this too often, it's going to take up too much time, but just something to think about, especially when you're practicing. I would recommend trying to do this every now and then. And 10 years of worry with incubators that did not hatch, and with tiny and in their own way lovely balls of fluff that passed on into semi-naked pullet, I think that word is, hood, and from that into dead henhood, we threw all aside and packing our belongings on a wagon drove down Griggs Road toward Bidwell, a tiny caravan of hope looking for a new place from which to start on our upward journey through life. Okay, so the highlighted portion here where it says tiny caravan of hope. Your question is, which type of literary device is the highlighted portion in the paragraph above an example of? Is it A, dialogue, B, metaphor, C, simile, or D, none of the above? So now is your chance to pause the video, try to figure this out, and whenever you're ready, as always, we'll talk about it. Okay, so the correct answer here is B, metaphor. So let's talk about this here. So basically, if I were to say that the wagon driving down the road was like a tiny caravan of hope, saying it's like a tiny caravan, that would be a simile. So if you see a comparison between two things using the word like or the word as, that's going to be a simile. Now, if you see a comparison between two unlike things and you don't see the word like or as, all right, it's probably a metaphor. So in this case here, this is comparing a wagon to a tiny caravan of hope. This would be a metaphor. All right. Now, for dialogue, that just means talking. You're going to see quotation marks around the sentences. That would be your clue that there's dialogue. So hopefully this one makes sense. We must have been a sad-looking lot. Mother and I walked in the road. The wagon that contained our goods had been borrowed for the day from Mr. Albert Griggs, a neighbor. One of its sides stuck the legs of cheap chairs, and at the back of the pile of beds, tables, and boxes filled with kitchen utensils was a crate of live chickens, and on top of the baby carriage in which I had been wheeled about in my infancy. Question: do you think Mr. Griggs will turn out to be a main character or a supporting character? This is up to you to try to think about this one. There's no right or wrong answer here, so I'll let you pause the video and try this now. Okay, so the difference between main characters and supporting characters. All right, the main characters are the major players in the story. They are the main characters involved. All right, so if you think of Star Wars here, that would be like Luke Skywalker, that would be like Han Solo, that would be like the main players in the story. All right, and the supporting characters just play a secondary role in the story. Now, that's not to say that supporting characters don't, have impact on the story, because sometimes they can have big impacts on the story, but it's just to say that they are not the major players in the story. They play that secondary role here, okay? And usually on the GED test, the main characters, their conflicts and experiences are what the whole purpose of the story, the whole idea and focus of the story is going to be on those main characters. Now, there's going to be some supporting characters, but the point here is that the main characters are usually going to be more important to pay attention to. All right, a character that comes up again and again and again is probably a main character. Supporting characters may just pop into the story and pop out. That's not to say, again, that they won't have a big impact on the story, because sometimes they can. It's just that they're not the main crew. All right, the main characters are the main crew. The supporting characters kind of pop in and out of the story. And for the sake of questions, I would say that, usually main characters are who you're going to get most of the questions about. All right, but supporting characters you can get questions on too, so you can note that too. But anyway, the main characters are usually the first introduced in the story, but it's not always going to be the case. But just keep this in mind here as you read, and especially when you go to your test. All right, and I would say the main characters, again, the takeaway here: if you identify someone as a main character, that's probably who you're going to get most of the questions about. Is going to be the main characters. All right, but that's not always going to be the case. Father rode on top of the wagon. He was then 45, and from long association with Mother and the chickens, he had become habitually blank and discouraged. All during our 10 years on the chicken farm, he had worked as a laborer on neighboring farms, and most of the money he had earned had been spent for remedies to cure chicken diseases that Mother found advertised in the poultry papers. One might write a book concerning our flight from the chicken farm into town. Which of the following words most likely fits in the blank above? Is it A, tall? Is it B, silent? Is it C, sane? Or is it D, correct? Now is your chance to pause the video, try to figure this out, and whenever you're ready, we'll go over the answer. And by the way, this what we're doing here with putting words, taking words out and putting blanks in. This is called closed deletion. It's another evidence-based method for increasing your reading comprehension skills. And some of my other videos, I usually put like a slide up that just shows some of the the sources of when I say there's evidence behind this, I usually put a slide up that shows some of those sources. But hopefully you can take my word for it that there is a method behind the madness here. All right, it might not seem like it, but the point here is that there is a reason behind why we're doing this right now when you practice. And at any rate, the answer here is be silent. Okay, so we are still dealing with the same exact text here, but now the question says, which quotation from the passage supports the idea that the father is silent and discouraged? Is it A, one might write a book concerning our flight from the chicken farm into town? B, father rode on top of the wagon? C, most of the money he had earned had been spent for remedies to cure chicken diseases that mother found advertised in the poultry papers? Or D, he was then 45. So now is your chance to pause the video, try to figure this out, and whenever you're ready, we'll go over the answer. All right, so the correct answer here is C. Now, if you think about this here, all right, why would the father be silent and discouraged? Well, probably because he earned his money, and then most of it he had to spend on curing the chickens, and so he's just kind of silent and discouraged after all of that. So C is the right answer here. Now, one other trick I want to give you here, if you notice A, B, C, and D, okay, C is the longest answer choice here. And again, this is a trick that will not always work. There's no guarantee this will work. All right, but if you ever are completely stumped and you have to guess, sometimes guessing the longest answer choice is going to be correct. All right, and that's often because the test writers will they'll pick a really long. They'll start with the right answer, right? They'll say, okay, C is going to be the right answer here, and they'll put like the long block of text there, and then for the other answer choices, they just kind of pick something down and they just get a little lazy and they kind of want to go home and get their paychecks and they don't care that much. They just slap something down for the other answer choices, and often that's why the right one will be the longest one. Now, I don't really know if they do that. They might not. That's just kind of, I'm half joking here. I don't know if they really do that or not, but the point is that, sometimes guessing that longer answer choice is going to give you the right answer if you have to guess. Now, again, there's no guarantee. That's not always going to work, all right, but sometimes that's worth trying. Mother and I walked the entire 8 miles, she to be sure that nothing fell from the wagon, and I to see the wonders of the world. On the seat of the wagon, beside father, was his greatest treasure. I will tell you of that. Now, what do you think is the greatest treasure? There's no right or wrong answer here. Let's just have you pause the video, try to figure this out, and whenever you're ready, we'll go over the answer. Okay, so possible answers here, maybe something sentimental from childhood, maybe money, an old family photo, could be another egg. All right, whatever you thought, as long as you took the time to think this through, consider that you got the right answer.